on this episode of the WildFed podcast.
Who are the Fishmongers? Like, what does that even mean?
A lot of people say, wow, that's a new way of doing seafood, but really we're going back to traditions.
If you're looking for really transparent fish that's direct from the boat to the consumer, that's us. Each step in the middle, the quality of the product and the story is diminished.
There's just this classic story between what the fishermen know and what the science community thinks they know.
I'm just a fisherman. I don't know everything, but I know you can't believe everything you see on Netflix. People in an aquarium in California don't know what's going on here.
Why not support the people who are setting a good example of how this fishery should be managed, and it's working?
Hook and line is, to us, the most sustainable way, and that's what we sell.
We import farm-raised shrimp while we export our wonderful shrimp. If we can keep it here, that's fantastic.
Some days it's not fun, but it's rewarding, and a lot of the customers really appreciate that we do it because we're keeping that fish local to the community.
Episode number 95 of the WildFed podcast, Cutting Out the Middleman with the Fishmongers of New England, is brought to you by Surthrival. If you're looking to increase testosterone levels without turning to pharmaceutical testosterone replacement therapy, have a look at Surthrival's pine pollen. Pine pollen is a rich source of naturally occurring testosterone and a suite of other androgenic hormones that can be used to gently boost your T levels. Right now until the end of August, the coupon code RESTORE20 gets you 20% off all pine pollen products at surthrival.com. My favorite is Surthrival's Pine Pollen Pure Potency, an herbal elixir formulated with stinging nettle root to keep your body's free testosterone levels up, while the pine pollen gently boosts them. It's got Siberian ginseng for hormone upregulation and maple syrup, vanilla bean, and orange peel to give it an incredible flavor. Stop by surthrival.com to check out the entire pine pollen lineup, including pine pollen powder, pine pollen tincture, and of course, pine pollen pure potency, Surthrival's flagship pine pollen formula. And for the rest of August, use the coupon code RESTORE20 for 20% off all pine pollen products at surthrival.com. This episode is also brought to you by Wild Food Warehouse. Wild Food Warehouse is your source for hand-foraged wild rice. And right now, they're also carrying a line of beautiful hand-harvested berry and plant powders from the northern latitudes of Finland. Their blueberry, lingonberry, and spruce tip powders are all sourced from pristine lands north of the Arctic Circle and packed in light-resistant, nutrient-protecting violet-colored Miron glass. I love mixing a tablespoon of these powders into a liter of water, squeezing in some lemon, and adding a little stevia to sweeten it. It makes a super refreshing and hydrating drink, and the rich color and flavor of these powders lets you know you're getting mega dosed with antioxidants and key nutrients like vitamin C. Head over to wildfoodwarehouse.com to check out their selection of Arctic-sourced fruit and superfood powders, and of course for hand-harvested wild rice too. As always, the coupon code WildFed gets you 10% off your order. Again, it's wildfoodwarehouse.com, and the coupon code is WildFed. I'm Daniel Vitalis, and you're listening to the WildFed podcast, a show about reconnecting with nature through hunting, fishing, foraging, and food. WildFed. Food is all around you. Never buy fish from a stranger. That's the motto of our guests Tim and Kayla, aka the New England Fishmongers. I kind of wish I'd grown up eating old, poorly handled fish from the supermarket. At least it would have been a whole food. But I was from a generation and culture that was raised on frozen fish sticks, cooked in the microwave and served with a bottle of tartar sauce. It wasn't until I was an adult that I started eating real, whole seafood. But even though that was a big step up from the frozen McFish of my youth, I had no real idea what great seafood tasted like. Not until I sought out locally sourced, ultra-fresh fish, and now I'm hooked. Okay, bad joke, but seriously, I meet so many people who say they just don't like seafood. And I respect that feeling. My beloved brother is one of them, but I lament it too, often wondering if they've been put off by old, mishandled, rancid fish. It's happened to me. Even until recently, I thought I wasn't a big swordfish fan. Every time I had it, the flavor of rancid fish was strong and the meat was often unpleasantly dry. But after this interview, the Fishmongers of New England sent me home with a steak from the swordfish you'll hear about in this episode. That fish had just been caught by a local tuna captain and cut by Tim and Kayla, and I got it home, cooked it, and I have to say it was the best piece of fish I or my wife Ivani, and yes, even our dog Ellie, had ever tasted. It was moist, as mild as chicken, with a buttery texture that felt almost decadent. So it's a great example of how easy it is to think you don't like something when it has more to do with care and freshness. Because as you'll hear in this interview, much of the swordfish sold commercially can be over a month old before it reaches your plate. The Fishmongers of New England have created a model that's changing the way consumers get their fish. From the boat where it's well cared for, to the fishmongers themselves who cut and package it direct to you at the farmer's market or restaurant. I'm hoping that this and similar models become the norm, not only bringing the fisherman and retail buyer closer together, but shortening the supply chain, ensuring that less of the quality and, just as importantly, the story of the fish itself and where it came from is lost in the exchange. Seafood is, in my opinion, one of the healthiest, most nutrient-dense, and physiologically most important food sources we can access, but it can also be some of the most ecologically unsustainable and, frankly, unpleasant to eat if it's not done right. So while Tim and Kayla are local to southern New Hampshire, this model is becoming more and more common. However you can do it, whether that means fishing yourself from shore, on your own boat, on a charter, or purchasing as close to the source as possible, sourcing clean, fresh, sustainable, wild seafood is one of the best dietary decisions you can make. If you don't hunt or raise your own animals, you need a good butcher. If you don't fish or get offshore, you need a good fishmonger. Fish sticks, be damned.
Tim, Kayla, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we got Grant Giuliano here. How you doing
Thanks,
today, Grant?
I'm doing well. How you guys doing?
Excellent.
Good.
Great. Busy today.
It's quite the operation you guys have here. This is awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, it's it may not look like much, but we cut a lot of fish in this processing plant here, so it's a lot of like blood and guts going on every day now.
I've already been quite impressed by several things I've seen, including the wall of coolers over there.
It's quite a few.
There's quite a few. So, you guys go by the Fishmongers of New England. Tell us a little bit about what you guys do, what's your business model's like, and what's your current operations like.
Yeah, New England Fish Mongers, we started several years ago trying to sell fish directly off the boat, our boat, to restaurants, which we don't do as many restaurants anymore. We were catching a lot of hook and line pollock we were targeting, and we were struggling to get a price that would even pay the fuel to go to catch them at the traditional marketplace. So we started very painfully over the years trying to figure out how to get these fish, get a better price for them, and then work with some other fishermen too that were struggling with the same things we were. We were hook fishing, which we still are. Then it was all rod and reel on my smaller boat, all by hand. Now, obviously, we use jig machines, which we stepped up a little bit. We still fish the rod when we're out hook fishing, too. We'll target haddock and redfish and stuff, which are easier on rod and reel. And it's kind of transitioned to a consumer business, direct-to-consumer. So all the fish we catch, scalloping in the winter, we scallop in the winter. And the tunas that you guys saw today, one from one of the boats on the TV show, Wicked Tuna, one from another fisherman in Portsmouth, some yellowfin tunas will all be portioned out, sealed, and sent to farmers markets and home deliveries all throughout the southern New England area tomorrow. So we get a pretty busy day, but that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to pay fishermen reasonable set prices for their products so they know what they're getting, because obviously on TV there's a lot of inflated prices, but that's not really the reality. So that's
You're talking about when people see the price of tuna on TV. It's not usually accurate how it's being shown.
It isn't. Maybe at some point here and there you'll see a price like that for a fish, but and the way the tunas come in, it's hard. We can't move every fish like that, but we're trying to move more and more. We've got some more fish coming in tonight from another friend of ours that was at the canyon. So yeah, we're trying to get these guys, especially the tuna fishery last year was really plagued by bad prices. A lot of these guys were having a tough time getting $1 to $2 to the boat, which
that's crazy.
It really is hard to justify making any sort of living like that. So we've worked pretty hard, and this will be a good test this weekend because we have two really nice fish out there. And it'll be for people to pick up at all the different markets. I think it's going to be a challenge, but I think people will be really happy with the finished product. And we carry that into the winter with our scalloping that we do, and we've also carried that and moved the business to working with not just fishermen in New England, but the shrimp we have is wild caught from Louisiana. Our friend Annie Marie Shrimp, he's a great guy. He does similar to what we do in Louisiana, and so his shrimp is sold wild caught. And the salmon that we have is from our friends in Alaska. So we had wild-caught king salmon and lingcod last weekend We'll probably do coho soon. So we're just trying to make a wild caught option for people. We don't do farm raised, where the fishermen share the same values with us, and it gives the customer to get a chance to get really good wild caught fish.
You guys are, there's a bunch I want to say about all that. When I drove in, I saw on your trucks the tagline was "Don't buy your fish from strangers." Is that what it said? Mm-hmm. And I get the impression I do too. The model's sort of like a farm to table type model, but this in this case it's like boat to consumer or boat to the chef. So you're kind of cutting out what was the market like? What's the current model? That most, I guess, restaurateurs or general retail consumers are working with, and how does this model differ from that?
Well, there's usually more people in the middle.
Yeah.
It's all about that middle guy, which isn't, we can't feed the world with our model. I totally get it. I don't like to, pick a fight with everyone in the industry. There's a place for everyone's fish across the board, but this is a direct model. So, we're not saying that you can't buy fish anywhere else, but if you're looking for a really transparent fish that's direct from the boat to the consumer, that's us. And that, when each step in the middle, basically I've said this over my years fishing, each person in the middle, the quality of the product and the story is diminished.
Yeah.
Because there's a time that person has to take it and hold it, and then he needs to make money. And then the guy that suffers the most in those two circumstances is the fisherman, because he needs to be leveraged for those people in the middle to make money, and the consumer who gets an inferior product. Mm-hmm. So that is a difference here. And honestly, you can scale. We've scaled this up. There's no question about it, where we do different markets, and the vision is to do it for more fishermen. Because if we can do it like, with limited resources like we have, let's try to find a home for more of these guys, fish that they catch, not only here, but, it's here. And we've heard similar stories with the Alaskan fishermen. We talk to them on the phone and stuff, and they have great products. I mean, their salmon blows farm-raised salmon away. We stand against farm-raised salmon for a lot of different reasons. And there is an ability for us to call and get wild-caught salmon. So that is there. Yeah. So we don't simply have to accept farm-raised shrimp or farm-raised salmon. And
in the case of the shrimp, we interviewed the author Paul Greenberg. He wrote American Catch as one of his books. And he talked about how much of that shrimp, for instance, doesn't stay in the U.S. And then we import farm-raised shrimp from Thailand or whatever, wherever that's coming from, while we export our wonderful shrimp. And I'm glad people around the world get to eat our shrimp and everything, but if we can keep it here, that's fantastic. Or how I first learned about you guys was that you were buying the local bluefin. And being here in New England and knowing all the bluefins getting shipped off, usually I assume to Tokyo, to the markets in Tokyo. The idea that some of that fish gets to stay here is really exciting. Has there been, previous to that, how much bluefin was making it to restaurants around here? I never see bluefin on restaurant menus. Never see it.
I don't think much bluefin was sold domestically. I still think we're probably one of the biggest distributors of domestic bluefin in New England right now, or one of them. Because it's not easy. It's not an easy task to take a 500-pound fish, cut it up, and send it to 6 farmers markets all within 24 hours.
No, that's not easy.
So we hustle, and it's some days it's not fun.
Yeah,
but it's rewarding.
Yeah,
and a lot of the customers really appreciate that we do it, because we're keeping that fish local to the community. The resource is right in our backyard, so why not keep it here?
The restaurant part, just to finish that too, is it's also not cheap to do it the way we do it. So you can catalog. We can not have to do bluefin tuna like this. We can go and try to find pre-cut tuna loins. There's farm-raised bluefin tuna. There's all abilities to get it. It's where your values are with it. So, a restaurant can, and not all of them do this, but they can catalog shop seafood that's a lot more affordable. It's because it has all those different people in the middle, and they can also label it. One of the problems in restaurant world that's been for years is how farm to table, some places say they are, but they're not.
Right.
And that's, that's a challenge with it, because, and to their defense, you could run a menu. You can't run that menu based on hoping that the fishermen, because we didn't see any tunas in June, really. So it does have some challenges.
Yeah. So if you're a restaurant that doesn't have a changing menu, but you have a consistent static menu, you need that fish every week, no matter what. Yeah.
Yeah.
Versus, somebody who maybe is like, we've got bluefin this week, and they have the ability to do that on their menu.
We really try to push seasonality of species with what
Yeah,
we do. I guess it's one of the biggest things at New England Fishmonger. Scalloping, we are known for scalloping ourselves in the winter. We have a huge following for scallops around the holidays, and people really focus on that in the winter. And then we're really trying to push that with bluefin tuna. I think we're going to really try to push that this weekend. It's these fish go. Last year, they took off earlier in the fall. They didn't really catch a lot in the fall. And people were like, geez, I wish I had some more. So we're going to tell people, get them while you can. It's in season. It's like fruits and vegetables, same thing at the farm. You get strawberries are great when it's strawberry season. It's gonna.
But am I missing something, or is bluefin not like one of the greatest delicacies on the earth? I mean, to me, and I got to tell you, I bought 5 pounds. I think it was about 5 pounds that came through Ryan, from you guys, and from one of his fish. And I had some buddies coming in for production, and they ended up staying in a hotel. End of the story is I end up with 5 pounds for me and my wife. It's like, okay, we're gonna eat a lot of bluefin, but eventually we're cutting slices off and handing them to the dog, Ellie. And she acted so different than I've ever seen her act about any food. She would sit for 2-3 hours at my kitchen just waiting, like she knew it was in the fridge, and she's just waiting. And then every time I would go, like, it was almost like she was getting high on it, like the cat would catnip. I'm serious. You
feed her a lot of wild game.
She eats bear. She eats venison's her main thing. I feed her the most exquisite fishing game all the time. There's something about bluefin that makes her go crazy. Yeah, I'm like, what is it though? Is it like the myoglobin or whatever it is that we're learning about from Molly? There's like something in it that she's responding to. She was so well behaved, and now she's hooked. And I'm like, do you know how expensive this is? But now I'm not gonna be able to bring it home without her being on top of it. But I guess it's just funny to me that there hasn't been more demand here for this fish. Let's come back to that. I want to go back to something you've mentioned a couple times, the values. You guys are talking about what your values are. Could you kind of lay that out a little bit for us, and we'll come back to bluefin. But what's sort of motivating you guys from a moral or ethical or value-based place?
A lot of it's, like Ryan, you guys are working with Ryan, and you've had some of the fish. Ryan Bonner is an awesome guy, and he's a fisherman. And when you work with these guys and they like what you're doing, they help us. Ryan came out to a farmer's market with us when he wasn't fishing, brought his rod and talked to people.
Oh, cool.
And if the fishermen are being taken care of the best you can, they know you're working hard, they'll help you promote that story. So it's not just about us, it's about getting Ryan a paycheck when he goes fishing and making sure his fish is taken care of. So it's community-based value. Just trying to get the best product out to the customer. One of the things that we're going to be doing a little more of this summer is one of the things with bluefin tuna, you do get a lot of stuff that's not marketable for how it presents off a fish. So we're going to do...
you must take a spoon to that carcass and scrape every little bit
of
flesh off you can.
We do, and some of that is actually, speaking of dog food, we have a fisherman that's actually friends with Ryan who's working on making a bluefin tuna dog food.
Oh, that's cool.
God.
So he's been coming in and
I'm buying that from my emergency kit.
So he's supposed to bring us a sample tomorrow, and also getting some of that stuff that isn't marketable to someone that'll use it. And we don't want to... Full utilization. You guys, I know as hunters and outdoorsmen, it's about utilizing that animal, and that's what we're trying to do too. Let's not waste anything. Let's not waste that protein. We work so hard to preserve it. And the other thing with tuna that really, I think Kayla and I both have our heart to it so much is there's a lot of different movies out there that say a lot of different things about fishing. Bluefin tuna gets targeted heavily. And these guys get thrown under an umbrella of, all bluefin tuna fishing is bad and endangered. These guys catch their fish one at a time with a rod and reel. They work really hard. It's like an art to these guys. They work so hard.
It's been amazing to watch Ryan's strategy and how much goes into catching one fish.
Yeah, it really is. And they are not responsible for overfishing or the collapse of the fishery. By actually not purchasing your fish, you are hurting them. The guys doing it right. That's who you want to support, the people doing it right. So don't believe all that hoopla that's on whatever, Netflix. I mean, it's not right.
And why not support the people who are setting a good example of what the fishery really should look like for the rest of the world too, because there are a lot of bluefin fisheries around the world that are not sustainable the way they are in New England. So, I mean, we're setting a really good example of how this fishery should be managed, and it's working.
Yeah, we have a friend, Molly Lukovich, who heads up the large pelagics, or did head up Large Pelagic Research Center out of Gloucester. And she's been sort of blacklisted from the science world because she's got evidence that the bluefin here in New England are spawning somewhere off the coast. And the story has been that all of the Atlantic fish either spawn in the Mediterranean or in the Gulf of Mexico. And she was like, no, we have, like, here's the gonads, here's the fish larvae, like, we have proof that they're spawning here and that the population's strong. She said out of the spotter planes, they would see sometimes in a day the number of fish that are supposed to be in the Atlantic, you know, but there's a big environmentalist push to get tuna listed as an endangered species. And she says the Pacific fish are not as strong, but that the Atlantic fishery is nearly a completely recovered and really strong fishery, right? And I mean, obviously, seeing these fish today, I mean, that one was, what, 108 inches or something that we saw?
Yeah, it's a large fish and a smaller fish. There's definitely, they caught quite a bit last year. It seems like the yellowfin fishery is pretty healthy. The canyon guys are
for
doing
folks
pretty
listening
well.
who are around the world, around the country, who are like, what are the canyons like? Describe maybe what you mean by that so people know.
We'll get right back to the show in a moment, but first, hunting season is right around the corner. Are you interested in learning to hunt effectively with skill and good ethics, but feeling overwhelmed with how much there is to learn or not knowing where to start? Maybe you just need some support to finally make it happen. Or you've already begun your hunting journey, but you want to increase your skills and knowledge to help you harvest more successfully and consistently. Check out The Hunter's Journey at thehuntersjourney.com. I can tell you from personal experience, being able to walk into the woods and bring home food to feed my family and community is one of the most empowering and rewarding feelings I know of. It increases self-reliance, provides excellent food, and is an avenue for land stewardship and deep nature connection. But getting started can be challenging, especially if you weren't raised in a hunting family. There's many barriers to overcome, like finding places to hunt, choosing what gear to use, learning the skills of the hunt, and knowing how to process your harvest. Chris Gilmore from episode 58 on tracking and awareness has designed an inclusive course and community to help you overcome those barriers and make the dream a reality for you. This course will walk you through step by step, beginning wherever you are now, all the way through to your successful harvests and beyond. And Chris has extended a special offer for WildFed listeners. Go to thehuntersjourney.com, watch the trailer, and enter the coupon code WildFed100 for $100 off the course. Again, that's thehuntersjourney.com, where the coupon code WildFed100 gets you $100 off the next step in your hunter's journey. Now, back to the show.
It's the edge of the continental shelf where the Gulf Stream kind of dumps out south of George's Bank. It drops off from about 700 feet to about 20,000 feet. And every year we have certain tunas that show up there, like yellowfins. We had a wahoo came in the other day, the first one we filleted.
I love it.
We had some different big eye tunas and stuff like that. More swordfish. That
You
fish
said mahi out there too?
There are mahi. Yep, they're seeing more of that. All the stuff you would typically see in a fishing magazine in Florida.
I was going to say, I think
And,
Florida, maybe Georgia want to hear these fish, but I'm
And
like...
it's just because that Gulf Stream is warmer?
It is, yeah, right where it
Yeah.
meets the cold water south of George's Bank. It's been, and more people are making the trip there. The fishing seems pretty consistent there. I haven't been myself in a long time, but we're actually going to go when our boat's all done
Yeah.
up to do it next year, a little
And
more.
Those canyons that line the continental shelf kind of creates an upwelling of cold water, like deep cold water that has a ton of nutrients.
Okay.
So it's also a really good environment for those fish to thrive
big
too.
ecosystem there supported by that. And that's where all the sword fishing is classically happening?
It was one of the bigger traditionally sword fishing areas along with the Grand Banks. I don't think there's a huge directed commercial fishery there on swordfish like you see in the movies anymore. I think there's a handful of guys, but it's the same thing. These guys are catching incidentally a couple swordfish if they're lucky on a trip. We did have one the other day, which isn't totally uncommon, that was caught about 10 miles out, which was a large one, the first one we did. But yeah, it brings a fresh fish that you normally can't get fresh in New England. It's a pretty cool story. It's like, yellowfin and wahoo. Who would have thought you could have that fresh off the knife yesterday? But they did.
I don't know if you guys are desensitized to it because, maybe it's like talking to a moose guide who's like, oh yeah, I see 30, 40 moose a year get shot and harvested or whatever. It's like not a big deal to them anymore. But when you're not, when you deer hunt and you walk up upon your first moose, it's like staggering to see an animal that big. And so today, just walking up into your truck and seeing that fish, it's like you guys might be used to it. I'm definitely not used to seeing a fish that big. I mean, the other day with Ryan, we catch a 100-pound tuna and bring it to the boat, and there's this whole like, oh, it's a short, and it's like, what do? We're going to keep it, we're going to release it. He's got the commercial and the rec license, and so we end up, let's keep fishing, and we release this fish, and everybody's all kind of glad we caught something, but bummed, at the same time, and it's a short, and then I'm thinking, have I ever caught 100-pound fish before? I was like, I don't,
Right.
that's like one of the biggest fish I've ever even seen, but we're talking about it like it's like a, it's little, and it's like, man, I catch like salmon and trout and stuff, I mean, big pollock is what, 15 pounds, 25 pounds maybe?
Yeah.
So seeing something like this is just staggering to me. Are you guys talking about this swordfish, which was what, like 14 feet long or so?
It was about that long. It was 330 dressed. It took the length of the truck with the head on it.
The sword itself was about almost 4 feet long.
Yeah.
So cool.
It's amazing.
And
Yeah.
that fish, we processed out and sold really quick. So and we had some too, because I've never had swordfish right off the knife like that.
Yeah.
It was a lot
Incredible.
different than what you see in a
Because
grocery store.
they'll get a little bit of that rancid fat, fishy flavor if they sit a while, right? They get kind of strong
Yeah.
flavor.
How was it different?
Just the texture of it wasn't dried out too. So like swords that are caught on a lot of different traditional fisheries, they're out for a long time. So that fish is
The boats are out a long time.
yeah.
And they got to fill that hole before they
interesting.
come back, right?
30
so they can be out
days,
there
right?
2 weeks, a month.
Yeah, a couple
Wow.
days, and then you put on top of that how many middleman,
Yeah.
and so there's, you got when you get into seafood that's handled that long, there's also added chemicals that go in, like, scallop boats that are on long trips, they'll treat stuff with sodium tripoli to preserve it. Preservatives, just like, are used to preserve stuff that needs to last a little longer.
And they just don't have to disclose that, huh?
I don't know. I don't really follow the
I've heard
language
the same
of that.
thing with like red meat. In the
Yeah, it's
grocery store.
like our buddy Justin telling us that he's a butcher, telling us, oh no, they dip all the meat in.
I didn't hear that.
Yeah, in antimicrobials, and I was like, oh.
Well, a Twinkie lasts a million years, right? So-
Well, I think that's a neat thing to talk about a little bit for people listening to this who buy their fish from. And by the way, your name is so good. Like my wife has been Avani, this whole month has been like, who are the Fishmongers? Like I keep because
It's so like
we're working on this.
old-timey. It's so cool.
I love it, right? And it's funny because 50 years ago or 100 years ago, to call yourself that would have not made any sense because that was what the profession was called, but just don't hear it anymore.
Right.
But she's been hearing me because we've been working on this bluefin episode for the TV show, and she's just hearing me say the Fishmongers like 3 times a day. It's come up, and we're on phone calls all the time and trying to coordinate coming down here to see you guys. And she's like, "What does that even mean?" She's never heard it, But for people who don't have a relationship with somebody like you guys who buy their fish at the supermarket, or maybe they go into a place like Portland and go downtown, where there's still some places on the wharfs or whatever. But what should people know about seafood that they purchase? And like what would be your sort of like, hey, just so you know, this is, because that what you just said about scallops being treated like no one's ever told me that. And I've bought scallops a lot over the years, and for sure they've been treated like that, and I did not know that. And it's not like there's a little, and it's funny because now you can't buy anything that doesn't say like known to cause cancer in the state of California.
Yeah.
I mean, almost you buy a rock and it says that on there, but like nobody tells you your scallops have been treated.
Well, we usually tell people to not rely on any apps to tell you what seafood is
Oh my
good
God,
or
right.
bad. That's one thing that infuriates Tim specifically, right?
It really does. Yeah. The apps, people in an aquarium in California don't know what's going on here. So, I mean, not to pick a fight with them, but I mean, do they know Ryan Bonner and what he's going through, or
Right.
have they come out to talk to him?
This is a classic thing that's gone on. Like when you talk to people in the commercial fishery, one thing I've noticed is there's just this classic story between what the fishermen know and what the science community thinks they know. And there seems to be a tension there all the time. And so you've got this thing going on where people who aren't necessarily fishing are trying to tell you what's going on. And it's not like they can just fly a helicopter over and count moose.
Right.
This is different, right? They don't actually know what's going on under there. So,
Yeah, there's a few other things that over the years people have asked me, and one of the ways too is, I mean, not to sound, I don't want to pick another battle, but with price too, if something's really, really cheap compared to something else, like if you see bluefin tuna loins for sale for $13.99 a pound, all right, do the math in your head. Who caught that?
Yeah.
What were they paid? Now, if they're paid literally a couple dollars a pound, to catch that fish, do you think they're going to take? I wouldn't blame them for not taking the greatest care of it, right?
So well, also they're not making a living off that either.
Yeah, you can't expect people to take good care of their fish if they can't make a living. So like, asking those types of questions, like, was a fisherman compensated for catching this? So that is one of the very difficult questions. Our fishermen participate. They wouldn't help us if they weren't treated fairly.
Yeah.
So that's
part of that model.
It is, and you really demand that they take the best care of their stuff because we are taking care of them. So that is part of it, obviously. At looking wild caught options. Or we can't stress that enough too. Is look for that wild caught salmon, wild caught shrimp. And so we're able to get it. Other people are too. So that's one of the things when you're walking around, if you're shopping for seafood. Obviously, we promote hook and line. Hook and line is, to us, the most sustainable way, and that's what we really promote here. That's how we fish, and that's what we sell. So, and we're able to do it, so hopefully other people can as well. We scallop in the winter, but we're a day boat. We're limited to 200 pounds of scallops a day. Large boats.
That's the weight of what?
Of the shucked
meats.
Okay.
And the bigger boats that are out of bigger areas are allowed, I think it was 17,000 pounds a trip last year. So there's a big, and not to say that those guys don't have a right to make a living.
I hear you.
We're not saying that, but I'm just saying if you're looking for the premium product, it's probably going to come off a day boat.
And what does it look like? Let's say we'll use tuna as an example. Or actually, I'd love to hear about pollock as an example. What does taking care of fish look like to you guys? Because it's not, I think the consumer, maybe they do the app thing and they go, what fish is it ethical for me to buy? And they're using the apps for that. Or maybe they get to the fish department and they're going, what's fresh? But not understanding that fresh isn't just about how long it's been since it was caught, but how it was cared for on the boat and how it was treated. So what does good practices look like for you for the freshest pollock, the freshest, tuna from the moment it's caught?
Yeah. So we always say the quality starts on board. So when we catch a bunch of pollock, we bleed them to let all the blood out of the
What's your method for bleeding? I've seen people do it a bunch of different ways.
We just make one strike across the right under its mouth.
You cut that collar. So
right at the
from
collar.
Gill to gill.
From gill to gill. And
so you might lean its head over, make that cut.
Yep, grab it by its mouth upside down and make one cut.
Yeah, okay.
Bleed that out. Let it bleed out either in a vat filled with water, so it kind of bleeds out a little bit easier than that. And then
they bleed out better in the pressure of water than just out in open air in a tub.
And then we'll remove all of the guts. So you make that one slice down the center, remove all the guts.
You do that while you're fishing? Mm-hmm. Really?
Yep. Rinse out the cavity of the fish, and then pack it in ice inside and out.
Right on, yeah.
And then don't just throw the fish into a box, place it. You don't want to bruise the meat. Make sure it's completely submerged in ice, not sitting in the sun.
It's hard because we go out a lot of times either on a charter or we'll go off on a head boat. Mostly on head boats, and the number of fish coming in, they do a great job, but they're busy, and you look at your fish sitting in one of those fish tubs out in just the sun baking on it, and you're like, somebody get to this, but you're busy fishing, you're trying to get your money's worth on the trip and get as many fish as you can, but it's hard because I want that super high quality, and there's they're not going in ice. Yeah,
usually on head boats the quality is not the top priority.
Right.
But for us, we're selling the fish ourselves to the customers, so we don't want to be selling a fillet to somebody that looks like crap. We want it to look perfect. And you can tell a fish is really well taken care of if the meat is firm, it's not missing any scales. The
scales would indicate how much it's been handled and bumped around and stuff like that.
Yeah, discoloration in a fillet from the bleeding is so important. Yeah. Even if you're on a party boat and you get the sun on the fish, getting that fish bled. Very few people in party charter do that. It gets the blood out of the fillet, and at the end user, the fillet just has a lot more.
You see it when because we went out on a trip recently where they didn't bleed them. And normally I'll just cut my own fish. I'll just bleed them myself to make sure it happens. But I got some fillets back that are just flecked with. Yeah. There's just blood in it. It looks like somebody went in with a little syringe and injected little bits in there.
Yeah. Then with pollock, Pollock's has a reputation for a long time of, it's a trash fish, underutilized species, whatever you want to call it. And pollock is one of those fish where 100%, if you don't bleed it, it does not come out even close to a bled pollock. A bled pollock, a nice white bled pollock fillet, outperforms, I believe, cod and haddock, or stands right toe to toe with it every time if it's taken care of. If it's not taken care of, it underperforms. And that's a huge thing that we've done with pollock. And that's, honestly, to tell you guys the truth, is one of the reasons why New England Fishmongers started, because I was taking care of pollock like this and literally getting the same price as someone that was out for 14 days on a trawler.
Oh, man.
And that's what kind of was like, geez, these fish eat. I got a few little high-end restaurants that say this is like, it made Food and Wine magazine. How come I'm getting 30 cents
You're
a
like
pound?
making Mercedes-Benz and selling them at the Hyundai
Pretty much,
dealership.
yeah. And that's the other thing about, like, the other thing, it's like you get this high quality, not only the fillet, but the collars. The pollock collars are really good.
Man, they're good.
So it's like, what we got enough. We're catching enough, and we have extra of it. We got to find a home for this stuff. So
I find this family of fish, so Gadiformes, all the cod relatives, I like them all. But I've always wondered, why is cod considered so much better than all of the other ones? Now, once I started to learn more about the history of it, particularly after we went up to Newfoundland and learned about the fishery there and the collapse of that fishery, and then I sort of learned about how, Europeans basically followed cod over to North America, and that was such an important part of the economy, and there were so many of them. But then I'd be like, well, haddock's really good. But man, every time you pick up a haddock, it like that orange shit gets on you.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And, they're so small. The fillets are tiny, even on a big one. But then you get these big pollock.
Yeah.
And it's like, now I can also understand with, let's say, a cusk is in that family. But that meat's always got worms in it. You're always picking those big red worms out. It's just, there's something, they're slimy and kind of nasty. But the pollock's like perfect. It is so, it's a pretty fish.
Really pretty.
People on the boats act like, oh, it's another pollock. And it's like, I always end up taking people's pollock because to me, it's a pretty fish. It's easy to deal with as far as like, it's not slimy or weird. It's not real wormy. It's just nice, clean meat. And I find it cooks as nice as anything. I think haddock's
agree.
maybe slightly more delegate, like a little bit more delicate of a mouthfeel maybe, but not as firm.
you get a better yield off the pollock too.
Way better yield.
Pollock yield quite a bit. I mean, they're all great if you take care of them. Even the cusk. We catch a lot of cusk.
I like cusk.
And cusk is great. You just have the belly meat obviously has a lot of worms. But it's just one of those things that I wouldn't turn your nose at the pollock over if we're catching a lot of pollock over the haddock, or if there's catching cusk and redfish. They're all, if you take care of them, they're all very good. But I don't think it's like you need to listen to someone that said pollock is a trash fish 28 years ago. It drives me crazy. Because if they're taken care of, they're
Do you think that's just historically that they were targeting cod, or do you think that it's because they weren't handled well?
Two things. Historically, the pollock fishery was usually a gillnet trawl fishery. It still is. There's not a lot of hook and line guys. So those fish, not to pick on them, not picking a fight with them, but hook and line fish outperform them every time.
Just because the method of fishing is harder on the fish.
You can't bleed a dead fish. Right. So that's part of it. They're working on volume, and they're not, working on the same level that we do with quality, and that's not their fault. That's just the way that fishery was designed. So that is a big part of it. And the other part of it is there's a lot of people that will catch an 8-inch pollock out mackerel fishing, and that is not the same pollock as the 28-pound bruiser that we catch 60 miles offshore. Those are softer pollock. So a lot of people have both of those things where they think, and it's just not the reality of it.
Got it. Kayla, I was asking you before about how to take care of them. Tell me about taking care of a bluefin.
A bluefin.
And also, one question I have about that, to augment it, is how much does the length of the fight determine the quality of the fish? So even before you get to start gutting it or putting ice on it, like how much is the fight itself?
So I am not a bluefin fisherman, pretty much at all. That's a better question for Ryan, but I can speak on some points that I know because I know so many bluefin fishermen and see them come in all the time. And I've seen really bad fish come in too. So the number one thing is to bleed it and get it cooled down as quickly as possible. I'm not really an expert on the whole fighting thing or how it affects the quality of the meat, but I do know the temperature of the fish when we get it is super, super important. So you want to take the guts out obviously, and pack that cavity with ice. I think a lot of guys also use their deck hose with some like pretty high pressure water to like clear out that cavity before they pack it with ice, and then that ice usually just melts because it's so hot.
Warm in there.
Yeah,
This
so
is like
you want
basically a
to.
warm-blooded fish.
Right, it's like I imagine it's kind of like gutting like a cow. I mean, it's huge. So you just want to keep adding ice, I guess, to just get the temperature down as quickly as possible. Don't let it sit in the sun. So sometimes you see guys in like center consoles come in with the fish
Always
just
with the
on
fish
the
sitting
back,
in the sun.
with no ice, or just a bag of ice from 7-Eleven sitting on top of it. It's never good.
Small on top.
Yeah, never good because the
Yeah.
meat burns. So those fish, while they're fighting, they get all like heated up,
Right.
and the acid in the muscles will literally burn the meat through at the core.
And you see that in the color as a color change in the sample, the core sample of it.
Yep. So we actually don't really do core samples because the fishermen that we work with, we know they are like the best of the best. Like their
Quite
fish are
boutique,
beautiful.
the whole way the operation works.
But you can tell when you take the quarter loins off of the fish, that bloodline is very distinct from the rest of the meat. So the bloodline is like a dark, like maroon red, not brown. You don't want it to be brown, with like a very distinct line between the cherry red meat and the darker bloodline. And that usually tells us that the fish has been cooled down in ice properly because it hasn't burnt. But if a fish has been burnt in the core, that line is it's just kind of all mushy brown in the center.
Okay.
Not good.
Not good.
At all.
Yeah. So if you don't have an ice hold, though, it's like the bags. Is that what people do? They put in
Yeah.
those tuna bags?
Yeah,
they
the
use the
tuna
bags.
bags, those work. But I mean,
I know people that have been using those for bears in the fall.
Oh, have
Because
they?
we have the same problem with bears coming out of the woods. It's
yeah.
great meat, but people think it's bad because they mostly have it when it's been mishandled.
Right.
But it's hard to get a bear cooled off. So anyway,
Yeah.
those bags come in handy for some people.
On the
Absolutely.
grading end of it, that grading thing is another more for TV item. So you guys are hunters, and a small bear tastes probably different. I'm not an expert hunter, but every animal eats different, right? Smaller ones, maybe the meat's a little
They always
different.
eat better unless
Yeah.
they're real small.
Yeah, so it's the same with the tunas. Every one of some are got more fat, some are leaner, some are tougher, and they can be taken care of, but not every fish. They're not alike. So you'll have some that have a little more fat, some that's like buying kind of like steak. It's the same principle. So as long as that fish is iced properly, bled out, and taken care of, it'll eat fine. We
Yeah.
haven't had any fish that have had any sort of like, oh, this is just not, graded properly or anything like that. I don't think domestically that is,
Even a thing.
Yeah.
it really isn't.
I think it's probably different though in like the auctions in Japan for sushi. They probably look at the quality, like the color and clarity. It's almost like a diamond. Like how did they do it on the show with the core sample? We just don't do that because if the
Different
fish is
market.
well taken care of, I mean, it's delicious. We
Right.
sell it within 48 hours. So we
Yeah.
don't really have to worry too much about that.
Okay, and one of the things that I've been hearing is, for a while I've heard about how it works. If somebody's not selling to you or an outfit like you guys, I don't know if there are many outfits like you guys, but if they're not selling to you and the fish are going overseas, how has that worked classically? Because this blows my mind. Like people, in reality, again, it's not like the TV shows where you kind of know right away what you're going to get for the fish, right? Your fish goes off to Japan and you aren't paid until it sells, right? So can you walk us through from like the time somebody gets their fish back to the dock, like how that works compared to what you guys are doing?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these, and it's a different place. There's more fish being sold domestically now, but shipping a fish, they'll buy a fish, they'll look at it, looks like it's pretty good quality, so they'll send it, but they don't know what it's going to get. So we're going to send it. We think it's going to do well. They're going to ship it, but they're going to wait for their return before they pay the boat their return. There's a lot more avenues to get bluefin tuna. They are farm raising bluefins. You have different,
Which means not farm raising as much as they're more like a cattle operation. They
Oh, yeah.
catch them live, right?
Yes.
In the sea wild, and then pen them
Yep.
and
I
raise
didn't
them
know
up,
about
right?
that.
That just kind
It's a
of
lot
bluefin, I mean, I didn't know.
Mediterranean.
turning the seas into farms, man.
Where is it that's taking place in the Mediterranean?
Yeah, and also some of the misconceptions about the fishery is those huge prices came out of a lot of times in the 80s too, when we talked about the economy in Japan was really like robust then. So that had something to do with what you saw with them shipping fish. But there's more avenues to get tuna now. So they ship fish, and I think some of these guys do get decent returns, but there's some fish that don't get much of a return, but they've already invested in shipping, so it equals that the boat gets pretty much minimal to no return.
Yeah.
So they have two options: sell it domestically, ship it when they come in, and it's kind of a crystal ball question for those guys.
It seems to me that there would, I've talked to different people, and some people say yeah, and some people say, oh no, all of it's public, but it seems like there's a lot of potential for fraud in a system like that, where an American who doesn't know anything, you're a commercial fisherman, you don't know anything about Japanese culture or necessarily how the economics of this whole thing works. You send your fish off, and then later you get a check, and you don't really, it seems like you could get ripped off consistently if you had a bad broker.
You could, yeah. I think a lot of it's just supply and demand too, of how much fish is coming in. They could have the same challenges we have. We have a lot of tuna right now to do this weekend. And, at some point they probably said, geez, I got enough, I don't need it. And if I get another one, they have to make a decision to try to sell it somewhere else or sell it for more affordable. So it's definitely changed over the years. I think some of they just don't ship a ton of fish anymore. That's the problem, So, and domestically, we don't have to pay what we're paying for tunas. We can buy tunas cheaper. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
The reason our values are trying to do that is because we're fishermen too.
Yeah.
And we know how hard it is and what you go through to do it, and how expensive it is to own a boat, and how many years off your life expectancy the whole racket takes off.
Oh, my goodness.
So not everyone follows that, and that's fine. We can't change that. But trying to get more of a home domestically for the fish and doing it the way we're doing it, I think, is one of the answers, because everything's been times 2 to 3 here. With the first year we did them, I'm not going to say I'm some bluefin tuna expert, because I'm not.
Right.
We just said, all right, well, this thing's fresh. It was taken good care of. Let's
right.
seal them up, cut them up. And people were like, this is the best I've ever had. So I said, I think this whole fresh thing is pretty good. So, and we're not experts. We had to Google on,
watching YouTube videos on how to fillet a bluefin.
Is this sushi Toro grade? I'm like, it's Toro. It's fresh though, and that's where you win. There is that fresh, off the right off the knife type deal. And one of the things we're going to be doing here shortly is, stuck in a dilemma like this, as far as getting too many, is we are bringing in blast freezing here. So when you take a fish that hasn't been in 18 sets of hands and fillet that fish, we are going to blast freeze some of those portions, so those are going to be as good, if not better quality than fresh. So when people say I want tuna in August, but they're on a shutdown for quota,
so you'll be able to store it.
We are.
I want to ask about that too, because, and I appreciate and understand that you guys aren't tuna experts. I'm thinking a lot about tuna because we've been going out on Ryan's boat, and I'm obsessing about it a little bit right now and been eating it. But people talk about it not freezing well, and that's something I'm curious about. And then Ryan keeps talking about this blast freezer, and I'm like, how does it work? Like, what is it? Is it nitrogen? Like, what does it do?
It runs at negative 70 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow. Because my freezer at home might go down to -6, and then my wife is like, babe, it's too cold. The ice cream's solid.
I can't get into the ice cream.
This is negative 70, and it has fans too, so it has that air circulation.
Moving. Okay.
It's about the size of like a cabinet.
It's
with
cool that
a ton
fans
of trays.
can run at that temperature.
Yeah. It's like a baking rack kind of with a bunch of trays.
This is after you vacuum seal it, you're going to put it in there?
We're going to vacuum seal the portions and then load up the blast freezer, freezes them solid in about an hour.
Is it? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then you transfer it to another freezer after?
Transfer to a walk-in freezer to store it. The most important part for freezing fish is to get it frozen quickly. I think it's not so much the temperature of the storage; it's how quickly it gets down to that frozen temperature.
Will it hold color at it frozen that way?
So we haven't blast frozen any tuna, so we still have to experiment a little bit. But we have frozen bluefin. It discolors a little bit. on the outside. It
Okay, but
just
you can
gets like a
remove
darker
that
red.
layer.
Yeah, but I mean, when you thaw it and eat it, it's so good
Okay.
that most of our customers do buy a few extra packs of bluefin when we have it and freeze it themselves, and they say it's delicious.
All right, good. Good
It's
to
also
know.
frozen so fresh too, so that makes a big difference.
Right.
It's not like
how
it's,
long it's been out of the water before it
Right.
gets frozen, and then how quickly it gets frozen. Those are the two kind of key things.
Presentation with it is huge. Ryan, so we had Ryan take a bunch of tuna back for his friends, and we had froze some yellowfin tuna pieces, some of the scraps, and they didn't look great. You know, they did. It's a presentation thing where we look at it and it just doesn't look as pretty as that gleaming steak right off the knife. So we always kind of, hey, what should we do with it? And Ryan's friends ate it and said it was like the best.
Wow.
So the way that's one of the challenges with tuna. It's kind of one of those things where just because it doesn't as beautiful as like in some picture, it doesn't mean it's bad.
Right.
Sometimes it's excellent. Just the way that the meat just will discolor slightly is a challenge with it, because it's, even for us, we kind of feel like, oh, it just doesn't look as pretty.
Well, we're very critical of ourselves
Yeah,
here. Like,
but-
unless it's perfect, we're like, oh no, we should like do a sale. It's not worth the full price. But then customers have it and they say it's incredible. So it's
You guys have been spurred on by the good feedback, it sounds like.
definitely.
Yeah, we've
Yeah.
had a big following, and right leading up to the season, it was people were basically like just asking nonstop, like, when's bluefin? When's bluefin?
That's so cool.
When's bluefin? And we could have sold bluefin, we could have catalog shop for bluefin, but we didn't.
Right.
We waited until boats here caught it. So
Yeah.
that's tells you, if you're looking for this type of seafood, places that are like us will be doing the same thing. They're not going to have it unless they're catching it.
Right.
And if you have some that's frozen, it's frozen from people that caught it like that, like the way we're doing it. It's not like we're, looking to, we're not going to go get fresh bluefin tuna loins in May
Yeah.
because they're not open here.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And you guys are sitting in front of this $1,000 tuna sword here, which is this beautiful knife. And for people who aren't seeing this, it would be like between a tanto and a katana is the wakizashi. It's like the middle-sized sword. It's like kind of like that. It's longer than a knife, shorter than a sword. I'm curious to hear about your learning curve in cutting these big fish, and maybe not just tuna, but like you had this sword recently. Again, like I was saying before, these fish, I'm not used to seeing fish like this. So I think about like when I'm filleting, the bigger the fish gets, the more sort of awkward things become. But this isn't a fish where you can kind of like grab it by the gill plate and just run a knife along the table. Like, what's this been like learning to cut these fish?
I mean, the tunas are like armor. The skin is so
Okay.
hard to cut through. So we definitely do use our Milwaukee Sawzall to get the
Wow.
head
Oh, you
off.
do?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Just to get through the skin.
Not to fillet like the quarter loins,
course,
but to
but-
cut the head off.
When
and
you
the
say
fins
quarter
and-
loins, you're referring because where instead of filleting straight across, you've got a fillet that's on the top, like the back loin, and then
Yeah.
you've got like a belly loin, right? So there's 4 fillets instead of 2.
Yep. Yeah, so we definitely have to use the Sawzall to get some parts like the head, the tail, the fins off, and then we can kind of work with the body, and we use serrated knives to get through the skin, and then for the more like smooth cuts, we'll use this tuna knife to make really clean cuts that
Yeah.
are just like one cut, so you're not sawing through the loin.
Beautiful presentation cuts and stuff like that.
Yeah, and he breaks down the tunas, and I portion them. So he does a lot of like the hard work. I get the more like artistic challenge
Nice.
of trying to
Yeah.
make like
Make it look
perfect little
good.
tuna steaks.
Yeah.
And then we'll have some of our staff behind us vacuum sealing and packing coolers and
Yeah,
It's
a lot
quite a
of
scene.
cursing in
Oh,
the
yeah.
first few fish for sure.
Oh,
But
yeah.
the biggest thing I've learned with it too, it's for anyone that's listening that wants to try to cut their own tunas, is those bigger fillets. Don't get greedy and try to do the whole thing. Like make some cuts
Right.
and take a small piece at a time. Because if you try to pull a huge fillet off, it tends to rip.
What's
and
it weigh
tear.
too? I mean,
It's
100-pound
hard.
fillet or something?
Yes,
50 pounds?
don't be too aggressive, and it's okay to do
Section it.
Yes, definitely section
It's
it.
going to get cut up anyways.
It is, and it's so the bigger the section, the harder it is without tearing, and then it's on. If you
Yeah.
hold it wrong, it starts to split apart. So that is like really take your time. and just be, don't be too aggressive with how much you cut off at one point.
Right.
And the top loins are actually pretty straightforward. It's the belly cuts that are a little challenging.
Now, that's also the otoro and
Yeah.
what's the other one called? There's
True Toro.
So that's the side of it, and then the belly part is the otoro.
So
Do you guys like to eat tuna, by the way?
we don't really eat much
I was
bluefin,
gonna
to
say,
be
I'm
honest.
getting like a we don't eat it. I'm getting a we don't eat it vibe over here.
No, I mean, I eat it. I like it. It's
But you're not like Toro doesn't like
well, when
light your
it's-
fire. You
No.
know?
It's like when you're covered in it all day.
Yeah.
trying to
Yeah,
get
right.
these things, the last thing, and it has tuna poses a lot of challenges because
It's oily.
It's very hard to clean up after. It's greasy.
Oh,
It gets
I
all
love
over
it.
you.
It's
You
like a
leave
bear,
here,
huh?
and
Yeah.
we'll get home and say we smell like a bluefin tuna right now.
Sure.
It
Yeah.
just doesn't come off.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a challenge with.
So you got way more fat in that lower loin when you take that off.
Yeah, and the other one thing to tell people, the listeners too, is when you cut down to the tail, and this is where everyone can learn. I'm still learning too. Cut higher up on the tail. Don't be greedy with the tail because it's all very tendony.
Yeah, it starts to
And-
get a crisscross of all the
Yeah.
fibers.
So get up on that tail,
Yeah.
like cut a nice, like almost like a log out of a fireplace. I know it feels like you're throwing a lot of meat away, but that meat is okay to try to scrape out for tuna filling or stuff that's not your prime cuts. But that portion of the fish will get you in trouble with it. It's just very tough. It's
Yeah.
tendons. Get it out of there. And we've been doing better since we've got away from that tail. Just cut it higher up.
Right.
Get rid of it.
So
But
go ahead.
Some of the best meat, though, is when you take those loins off, the meat that's right on the rib cage, just scrape that off with a spoon. It's like the most beautiful meat on the
And
fish.
then just eat it right then.
So
We
that's
don't.
what I want to
Yeah.
ask. So okay, so you get these loins off, and I imagine chefs or restaurants, your retail customers are snapping that stuff up, right? That's like the beautiful, nice steaks. But then when you've got this meat in the tail, you've bought this fish by the pound, so you must want to squeak every penny back out of it that you can, because you're paying. It's like the old days of buying the Mexican weed, and you're buying the seeds and the stems. And you're like, I'm paying for this weight
Oh,
here.
yeah.
So sorry, weird analogy, but you're paying for the bones, you're paying for the fins, right? All of that is wrapped in your price. So what happens with that fibrous tail meat? What happens with that meat that you're spooning off the carcass?
Yeah.
Is there a collar that's
Yep.
useful? Like
We sell the collars.
You do?
We have a pretty big following for tuna collars. And
Oh,
most of our
like,
customers,
Yeah.
yeah, most of the customers ask us, like, hey, can you cut this collar into like 6 pieces? Because the thing is huge.
Right.
It's really hard to work with, but it does feed a lot of people.
they roast it
It's-
or something.
Yeah, I know a couple of customers of ours will smoke them, like slow smoke the tuna collar. Yeah, it looks delicious. It's really
hungry.
fatty too,
Yeah.
right on the collarbone there. And then for the scrapings off the rib cage, we do like 1 pound packs of just a scraped tuna meat.
Yeah.
A lot of people make like tuna burgers with it, or it's
Right.
used as sushi filling.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it's all sold. And if it's not sold, sometimes we'll
like a
freeze
spicy
them.
tuna roll or something, like where you
Like
don't
chop
actually
it up.
see
Yeah.
the pieces, right? It's like more of a
That
filling.
makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like that. And then we'll freeze some. One of the farms we work with, they'll sell it in their store in their freezer too. So
Yeah.
usually all gets sold. There's
Yeah.
not much
Do you
that
have
goes
a
to
retail
waste.
like besides the farmers markets? Do you have a retail storefront, or everything is through the actual in person at the farmers markets?
We do home deliveries right now
No
too.
way.
People will buy
Cool.
like 10 pounds of this and that. So the kids are coming in later to go run some deliveries around of
Yeah.
some tuna, and we're looking at a storefront right now.
Cool.
It'll probably be within like the next 6 to 12 months because there's a lot of like work that has to be done on it.
Yeah.
But that's the next project. We need to get the boat done though. We have a huge boat project going on, so we need to do
Wow.
one thing at a time.
So you got
Yeah.
your hands in a lot of things, huh?
Oh yeah.
Because you guys, not only do you run this boat, but you guys are actually out fishing yourselves.
We are.
Yeah.
Man.
Some in the winter, Kayla and I do a lot of the scalloping in the winter.
Yeah.
Pollock trips in the fall are more up by what I do.
Yeah.
You know, and then in the summer we're going to be doing more canyon fishing next summer
Yeah.
because we have a blue shark problem here in the summer that makes ground fishing just like half the time impossible.
Yeah.
You know, it's getting worse. So
Can you describe for somebody who's like, what I don't understand what a blue shark problem is? Describe like describe that. And you must have a dogfish problem when you're polyfishing.
Not so much.
Dogfish we could care less about.
Really?
But no, they don't bother us. The blue sharks are
Okay.
they swarm us offshore. They're 8 to 13 feet long, and people think it's cool to see the first one.
Because they're pretty. They
Oh,
are really
yeah,
so
but
blue.
then there's about-
commercial fishermen hate them so much, but
Then
they
show
are so
up-
pretty.
They show up by like the droves. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
they have 40 frenzying sharks around the boat, and once the blood's in the water, they're all excited, and you can't get your fish to the boat. And every time they come by, they snatch the pollock, they break the leader off, they take the jig, and they don't care.
Yeah.
You'll see them come back, towing the same pollock behind them on the leader, going to eat another one. They
Sounds
just
like
keep
you need to bring them to market.
Yeah.
it isn't. It's an underutilized species.
Everybody talks badly about it, but I've been reading some stuff lately that they can be good eating if you're.
We
if done
did.
right.
We brought one to a restaurant one time.
Did you?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
How'd
we
it
went really well. So one of the things with the blue shark, this was not, we just did it for just to see if people liked it. We harvested one, and we bled it and brined it. We soaked it in seawater and ice and took care of it like exceptionally well, and it ate excellent. It really did, because we took care of it. We took a
Yeah.
lot of time, and it wasn't anything we did for market or sale. We just wanted to see
See
the meat,
what would happen.
and the meat was excellent. The restaurant actually made blue shark tacos that week.
Oh wow! Are they
And-
oily or
No,
like
no,
because
it was-
people are always like, oh yeah, the shortfin makos are good eating, the poor beagles are good eating, the threshers are good eating, black tips are really good eating, and
Well-
then the people just don't even talk about the blues.
Unfortunately, the shark thing, too, a lot of the guys that harvest these sharks on the recreational side of you're going to see the sharks, and they come in at the tournament laying in the parking lot, 98-degree heat,
Yeah.
and hanging up, and then people take pictures. What type of meat are you going to get?
Smelling like piss too, I imagine.
Yeah. So you can't parade around with the thing. It
Yeah.
needs to be taken care of right away. So that's where they get
Yeah.
a bad reputation. So I mean, there's plenty of them around. Where it's nothing we're doing right now, but I think it's one of those things. If you take care of things, dogfish is the same way.
Well, first, I want to talk about dogfish and about eating them, but how are they not a problem for you? Is it where you are? Because
it's where we are offshore, and
yeah,
once
because they're a
on the
huge
beach,
problem on the recreational side where we've fished.
Oh, the blue sharks are our problem. So offshore, once they just start busting off all the tackle.
Okay.
But we're targeting pollock, so we're not bait fishing. So obviously, party boats that have a whole bunch of clam, clam,
right.
mackerel, clam dunkers, whatever you want to call them. That's like a chum slick for dogfish.
Sure.
So that is a dogfish.
For people
magnet.
listening, the dogfish are small sharks.
Small stand sharks, yeah. So they don't, and blue sharks pose problems for them too. But when you get with our world, the blue sharks are really heavily after the pollock, and it's a race.
So the blue sharks are eating what you're catching, and the dogfish are eating what you're catching. You're trying to catch with.
Oh yeah. You catch more dogfish on a hook because dogfish
Right,
love
versus the jigs. and
love
stuff.
baited flies. So if you're haddock fishing and you get, oh geez, what's going on out there? So sorry about that. But
Oh,
it's
good.
the blue shark situation. I mean, if you catch a dogfish, you take it off, throw it back. One of the misconceptions about the dogfish thing too, with everyone listening, Party Charter, the answer to when you catch a dogfish, a lot of guys think break the neck, throw it back. Not the answer. Actually makes it worse because the blood from that dog draws in more.
Oh, yeah.
And so all those things are myths that do not work.
Okay, whenever I've been on the party boats and I'll be like, hey, I want to keep that dogfish, they get so annoyed.
Yeah.
Like, no, you don't. I'm like, no, I do. They're like, you don't, though. I'm like, no, but I do. And I have eaten a few and found them to be fantastic.
Especially the same thing with the dogfish and the blue shark, same thing, pass the urine through the skin. So when you see dogfish come in on a dogfish boat that are left out in 98-degree heat with no ice on them, are they going to taste great? Probably not. So that is a big difference, with dogfish and blue shark and any of that type of stuff. You really have to take care of it. So one of the things that we did with dogfish for a little while, just in small quantities, is we bled them, gutted them, brined them, which is seawater and ice, soaked them, packed them in ice, and they ate almost as good as ground fish.
That's crazy.
It's
And
just
that is the thing that they're using in the UK now. In fish and chips, I hear a lot of it is now dogfish, where it was classically it was cod.
Yes, they are. The fishery here was a high volume fishery for years, so it doesn't really exist as much anymore. But I'm going to be perfectly honest. I would never eat a dogfish off one of those fish. They're not iced.
Yeah.
They come in steaming vats, sitting in the heat, and what they do with them, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I probably don't want to see it.
Right.
So sometimes I really think when I see those things, why don't we just take care of stuff a little better and get a better quality, resource out of it. But the blue shark, back to the blue shark thing with our fishing, is when you get 20 to 30 sharks in a feeding pattern around the boat like that, it becomes next to impossible.
Move or what?
You move, but they follow you.
Follow us.
You're gutting and gilling. You got blood coming off the boat, and they see it, they smell it. They are there waiting for you, and they beat you down like. The biggest beatings I've had in my life come at the blue shark's expense, and they're heartbreakers because you'll have like a beautiful triple or a quad of pollock coming up, and right at the boat, like right at your leader,
at the surface,
pow,
they're taking
and you
it.
get nothing back, and then they smoke the tackle. All the drags are smoking. The jig machines. I mean, we had some major messes because they would just get one machine and then roll down the side of the boat, literally snapping all the leaders.
No.
So it just becomes really challenging.
Wow.
Every year is different with them. They get their most aggressive right in early October before they trek back to South America. So they're trying to...
That's where they go.
They do. The blue shark travels the longest distance out of any shark.
Wow.
That's what those big fins... They're incredible animals.
Yeah.
Even though they've tortured me my whole life. But they make their trek back, and they're fattening up for their migration. So they are most aggressive feeding then. Okay. So sometimes we'll get there, and we know early in the morning they're a little less active. So you literally have a blue shark clock.
All right.
At like 8:30, they're coming, and when they come, they don't stop.
Could you sell them if you wanted to, or are they only recreational?
They're recreational. We don't carry a HMS shark permit for selling. If you want to talk about policy and fishing, that's a whole nother podcast, which would horrify your listeners. But we don't direct sharks right now, because for a lot of reasons. We have our hands full with this. Also, I think you would see a lot of flack from people about
we've been running into this.
Well, and that's the same thing too. It goes back to the Seaspiracy nonsense.
Oh man, is that one of the worst productions you ever watched?
I can say that. That guy's an idiot.
A total
if he wants
idiot.
to call me, I'll tell him he's a moron.
Yeah, I think it's okay to say that. And the Netflix even hosting that kind of content where you don't have to be that, you don't have to know that much to tell that you're seeing a super biased account here, and the way it conflates the U.S. fisheries with these foreign unregulated fisheries as if it's all just one fishery is really offensive to the mind.
Just because you went to SeaWorld when you're a kid doesn't mean you know what the hell's going on here.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's. But
we found the solution. It's soy shrimp. Like a solution at the end where it's like, oh yeah, that looks real good. Get me a frozen box of soy shrimp, please.
It gets back to the whole thing we're talking about with tuna. Obviously, and sharks is the same thing. If someone that's harvesting one shark on a rod and reel to sell that, do I think that they're causing the extermination of the shark? Right. No, they're not.
Right.
That's a person you should be supporting. That's instead of having the sharks are discarded so heavily commercial fishing.
Right.
Well, what's better to have someone go out and bring a shark in and utilize it, and as opposed to take a shark.
I've been eating meals like I harvested one black tip, and I've been feeding off of that thing for months.
And the shark activists have to realize that those aren't the people that are the problem.
Yeah.
Obviously, directed heavy longline shark, directed longline fisheries in general that really have a blue shark every line that comes up. I mean that's different. So just don't punish someone that's harvesting one shark. They are not the reason for any sort of collapse. It's the same with the bluefin tuna. It's like bluefin tuna is going through a lot of that with right now. And like you said, Ryan works real hard to catch several fish a year. He is not. A lot of these guys are. They're not responsible for the collapse of that fishery. They're doing it right. So support the people doing it right. Yeah. Don't support the people doing it wrong.
Right. What? Any other interesting? You guys are ground fishing. Is there any other interesting species that come up that do go to market, monkfish or things like that? Like what kind of fish are you sometimes like, oh, that's a bonus. Like we'll bring that to market.
Oh, we get monkfish once in a while, but they don't really hit their jigs that much.
Okay,
So it's like once in a while. If you drop the hook down and it basically lands right on the monkfish's mouth, it'll take it. Yeah. Yeah, so that's cool. We sell those. Yeah. People love monkfish. But as far as other species,
I'm seeing more Atlantic halibut on our trips offshore, spring through early summer.
You think they're doing well?
Better.
Better, recovering.
Yeah, better. Could be better.
So managed that fishery, huh?
It's another podcast. It's the whole catch share system that we're on with commercial fishing. A lot of the species would be a lot more recovered if we didn't lease out the rights to the fish. But that's a long discussion to have about the policy.
Policy's complicated.
It's very complicated. But yeah, the halibut are doing better. Cod's not. The style of management that the fishery is on now is you have to lease in quota from someone that owns quota. It's very complicated. It'd take a long time to explain.
And quite an archaic feeling system. When I hear about how that works, it feels like it sounds like some medieval European lordship thing or something.
It's very basically kind of consolidated the fishery. So the big are getting bigger and the small are going home. I know that everyone says that about everything, but fishery really it's happening.
Yeah.
And they lease the rights from one species. We have to lease our fish. Recreational fishermen will sometimes say, "Oh, how come you can keep cod?" Yeah, well, we got to pay for them. We have to pay sometimes $3 a pound. Leased whole live weight fish, which means
somebody's getting that spread. That's
someone that's not fishing. We like to call those people slipper captains. So I mean, it's just we do. I've said
sure.
that. I don't have to hide
I'm sure
it.
they know that's the. I'm sure they know they get called that.
Well, what this style of fish, this system of management, basically, what it did was it took away limits on fishing. So it's a general, and the bigger fleet owns more than the limit. The bigger fleet is more efficient than the smaller fleet. So they got the bigger boats that can fish around the clock, fish the weather. Sometimes inefficiencies in a fishery is good, and people like Ryan, people like us, we can't go every day, or we're not a factory. We don't. The machine doesn't always. We got to repair our boat. Maybe you're building a house. Maybe you're having a kid. The smaller fleet tends to have.
So that allows you to still have.
It gives a fish a break.
Income.
So it's just you're not going to harvest every.
Right.
It's a better. The smaller guys are definitely better for the fishery, I think, but it's just the style of management that we're on. And cod is always an answer or question we get about from recreational side, but we have to pay such a high lease price for that fish that our returns on cod is next to nothing half the time.
Okay, yeah. What's hard on the recreation side is you catch cod and you watch so many of them die or get picked apart by seagulls when you release them, and you're like, man, I wish I'd just been able to take a fillet off the side of that, because there goes that fish,
Very hypocritical business sometimes. So for most of the people that know me, I started fishing. I'm one of the few commercial guys that actually supports recreational too. I started fishing as a kid on party boats at 7 years old on a boat out of Perkins Cove called the Bunny Clark.
That's right. Yeah, we fish with Ian out of there all the time.
Great people. I learned how to fish there when I was a kid. He's an awesome guy, awesome business, taught me a lot about fishing.
One of the last in the game.
One of the last in the game, and you got to take a look back in the mirror at yourself and say, I was that kid that liked to go fishing. We don't need to take the rights away from recreational fishermen. They are not responsible for the collapse of codfish either.
Yeah, right.
So who are you penalizing? A family that's literally spending more money on buying all the stuff to go fishing and stimulating the economy to catch a couple codfish for dinner. They're not responsible.
Right.
But on the bigger side of the industry, they leverage. Do you guys understand how much they count the TAC for recreational and commercial fishing? Do you know what the total allowable 100% of the piece of the pie for the fish, the stock? Do you know what they deem the recreational side harvest is? I think, I'll get you the exact numbers, but it's between 30 and 40%. So they think recreational fishermen are catching, there is millions. No way that they catch that much. You're talking million, because a lot of people, it's the same thing. I mean, not everyone's an expert fisherman. Some people are good. Some people have bad days. So they get pretty penalized pretty heavily too. Okay. So I think people like us uniting with recreational is a better thing.
That's good, yeah. And then I guess I just want to kind of close this out talking about the success of your model, and do you think that this is sort of where things are headed? I mean, when you look at what happened with the farm-to-table movement and the food renaissance, especially up around here where we've got all these farmers who are now selling direct to their customer, right? And they're doing so much better. There's this renaissance around that. This is what you guys are doing in the future? Are you guys sort of just getting in the game early, and have you gotten really good feedback, or is there any resistance to your model from anybody? Or
I mean, a lot of people say, wow, that's a new way of doing seafood. But really, I say, we're going back to traditions. We're just cutting out all the middlemen that have the system has been created around. So, I mean, we're growing every year. now.
Seems like it. Seems like you're in a rapid growth phase from what I can tell.
Honestly, we really need a storefront badly because customers want to come find us
Yeah.
and buy stuff
Right.
every day of the week. And we do these farmers markets, which are great and busy in the summer. And we work with the farm stands in the winter time too. But definitely the next step is to open up a store. And if we can like crack this thing that we're trying to do, it like opens up the doors for other fishermen to try to do the same. But it's definitely like a tricky puzzle for sure. There's a lot of moving pieces. Seafood is an expensive industry either way. And we're in fishing and seafood, the fishing industry and the seafood industry, which
Yeah.
are two different industries. So we're trying to figure out both.
Right. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So I think we're making it, but there's still a ways to go. This
Long
tuna
ways.
sword was one step
Oh yeah,
today.
yeah. We're not, and we're not. We figured a lot out as we go, and how do you? We just want. You don't want to scale up and screw up at the same time, you know.
Right.
So we're just trying to stay true to what we are, and in it. But I do know there's enough tuna. I mean, not everyone in this zip code is eating our fish.
Yeah.
But we have enough fish to feed a lot more people if we want to. So how do we do that and get it to where these fish are coming in and getting people? We have enough like tuna tonight to feed a lot of people, and
Yeah.
with everyone calling us.
Those two horses out there in the
Yeah.
truck.
You know, so it's like, and there's more of them coming in.
Yeah.
There could be more. So how do we do that where we get a good return for the guys catching them and get the best quality fish to more people, which is what we want to do and what we're trying to do. And I do hope more people do this, because the more people that eat wild caught fish, you're supporting fishermen in Alaska.
Yep.
You know, and wild caught shrimp, you're supporting our friends in Louisiana. Our good friend Lance, he's an awesome guy. He's one of our great friends,
And shares the same values as us too. It's like a network of fishermen trying to do the same thing, which is really great because we can bounce ideas off of each other, work with each other. Like if we have too many scallops in the winter, Lance, the shrimp captain down in Louisiana, will take some of our scallops and he'll send us some shrimp. So it's all working out. And we're not like alone. There's other companies that are like us across the country. But it's more of like we're trying to work together versus against each other,
Yeah.
which is really cool.
For people who are listening who I guess are local enough to come get fish from you guys, tell people how they access what you're doing.
NewEnglandFishmongers.com, and our social media, Facebook is big at New England Fishmongers, and Instagram. We have our market schedule on there, which is posted.
It's extensive.
It's
Yeah.
I
extensive.
looked at it. I was like, wow, it's a lot of hustle here.
I'm
'Cause you
doing
guys are
one
at
Sunday.
all these
I've got
markets.
Kittery, so we're rolling all the trucks tomorrow.
Right. So they go to the website, they see where you're
Yep.
going to be, when you're
Yep.
going to be there, and they roll up with their bring your cooler pre-iced.
Yeah,
And,
we bring ice for customers. We have a home
I
delivery
get my
service.
friends get like I got this friend Mark who I work with, and he always makes fun of me, but I get mad at his warm ice all the time. He's like, "What do you mean it's ice?" I'm like, "Dude, I sent you to get ice. You go to the store and you just put
Bring
it in
it
your
back
back
without the
seat.
cooler.
Oh,
It's
no.
melting. It's cold. I mean, it's not cold." And he's like, "What do you mean not cold? It's ice." Or I'll be like, "Ice the cooler, man,
Yeah.
because the cooler's warm." And like people don't always understand like how thermodynamics work, but
Oh,
it's nice of you
absolutely.
guys to provide ice. But it's like
Mark's
bring
definitely
yours.
going to hear this too.
Good. He needs to learn.
But yeah, those are where we are now, and then on our website has all the info, and
Cool.
we get a lot of phone calls. We do our best to take care of everyone. We're looking at a storefront, hopefully soon. We've kind of explored shipping a little, but it's challenging.
Yeah.
We're not Amazon.
You don't currently
we-
do online
Yeah,
stuff.
you got to be a really big company to get
Yeah.
shipping rates, and we're going to work on the storefront. And eventually, I'd like to do. A lot of people call from around the country because they hear stuff like this. And it's bigger orders that I want to work on with people like that. Like, hey, I can't, take the time to send you 5 pounds of bluefin tuna, but work with your neighbors, friends. If you get like a 100-pound
People
order,
together.
believe it or not, we use, with Lance, we use Southwest Air Freight. It's actually pretty
neat.
affordable
Okay.
to send stuff. And it's something that we want to do down the road is if someone says, I want to get 100, but you got to go in with your buddies,
Yeah,
and make
yeah.
it worth it for us and you.
Yeah.
I tell some people, I'm like, I don't know, buy it from us. You probably could charge an extra $1 out there off
Yeah,
your
exactly.
buddies.
Get your tuna for free.
And the stuff is really expensive in the
Yeah.
Midwest. So definitely,
Right.
or in places where you can't get it. So that's something down the
Yeah.
road, but we're trying to do a little more. But at the end of the day, I mean, I like what we're doing. We like fishing. Our customer base is the best. I love our customer. We have so many good people that support us, and
Yeah.
it really makes it like really rewarding to hear someone say that was like the best piece of fish.
Yeah.
So we just want to do it so we can do it for more let's find a home for all these
Right.
good fish.
Right on.
So cool.
Yeah, and I'll just say that in our network, we get to talk to a lot of people doing this, and we've heard so many positive things about you guys from so many different parts of the state. Like people all over, we're hearing your names a lot. We're hearing about your business a lot. People are speaking so highly of you guys. So just word on the street is really, really positive about what you guys are doing.
Feel really good.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. We've been working, Kayla and I have been working like 7 days a week at this thing with very little time off. Cameron is helping us and all our staff. We work really hard at it and very passionate about it. And we just want to do the best we can for our customers and the people that are catching fish with us, like Ryan, who you guys are working with, and hope we can do it for, it's really the goal. Let's get the freshest fish. Utilize these fish that are coming in on our boats and across, like Alaskan. Let's get that stuff to the people, and you get what you pay for too. So obviously you can go buy a piece of farm raised salmon. That's fine if that's what you can do. But this is you just you get what you pay for with anything in life, and seafood's the same thing.
Yeah. Take us out by, I just want to imagine somebody who's watched Seaspiracy, somebody who's on the fence about understanding this, somebody who hears only the sort of sensationalized stuff about the fisheries. What's your sort of concluding ideas for people who aren't really clear about what's going on in the fishery? What's your final thoughts for people who are like, I just don't know what to do when it comes to seafood?
It's a tough one, but I mean, obviously listen to stuff like this, and listen to people that do the job directly. There's a lot of good, literature out there and stories, and don't believe everything that you see in mainstream media. Obviously, I'm
learning that.
I'm just a fisherman. I don't know everything, but I know you can't believe everything you see on Netflix.
Yeah.
I know that.
Yeah.
Think about things. Think about someone that's fishing and the style that they're fishing. If they're not a big, giant corporate entity and they're catching one fish at a time, think, is that guy responsible for this story? And that's really a good way to look at it. Scale is everything in this business. It's a scale of, like we talked about our scalloping. We do 200 pounds a day. They're doing 17,000 pounds. Are we responsible for any sort of collapse of the scallop fishery? Or Ryan Bonner catching one tuna, he's not responsible for that. I mean, I don't have the answers to everything, but I know, the Alaskan guys work really hard. They have a pretty vibrant fishery, and this is where we work with the troll fleet up there. So those guys, they're not harvesting every salmon in the world.
Right.
So those are the things I think that can help a lot. And just, and obviously full utilization of the animal. Don't be deterred to buy, the miscut or whatever tuna poke packs that we make. It's great source of protein. Let's not waste any bits of these fish. I mean, I know you guys are hunters, and that's a policy that you guys follow hunting too. Utilize that animal. If it's hard to, it's a resource, so let's use it all. Let's not just throw it out because it doesn't look as pretty as that piece.
Right on. Yeah, guys, thanks so much for sitting down with us today. I know you got a time is of the essence, so we appreciate you doing this.
I'm looking forward to this sword. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, so I'm pretty. I don't know. I'm pretty excited about using it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I kind of want to watch.
Thanks for listening to the WildFed podcast. You can help us grow this show by subscribing and leaving us a rating and review. It ensures better rankings and more advertiser interest, which translates directly into better shows, more awesome guests, and a constant stream of fresh, new content. Have a question you'd like answered on the show, or a hunting, fishing, or foraging trip you'd like to host us on? Email us at info@wild-fed.com. And be sure to visit our website, wild-fed.com, to check out the WildFed video show and store. WildFed. Food is all around you.